Is this it? Is this finally the year that Coach PJ Fleck beats Bret Bielema? We're talking about today on Locked On Golden Gophers.
You are Locked On Golden Gophers, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Gopher fans? You're listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, Monday through Friday. Today, we're busting it in, talking about another of the behind the enemy lines, breaking down every single Gophers opponent on the schedule for this season. And we are at week 10. We are with the Illinois Fighting Illini. We're going to break them down. Can the Gophers finally beat Coach Bielema, PJ Fleck? It seems like he's had his number. Bielema has had Fleck's number, So hopefully they can get it done. We're going to talk about the different changes. We're going to talk about the consistency across these across this Illinois Fighting Illini team. And then we're going to talk about the strengths, weaknesses, and make or break for the season, or the game, week 10. Wow, fumbling my words, but we'll get there. Regardless, I want to kick off today's show with something a little bit different. We're going to talk about RJ Young's rankings of the entire FBS, all 134 schools, and where the Gophers landed there. I think they were grossly underrated. We're going to dive into that. So be sure to hit subscribe over on YouTube. Be sure to follow wherever you get your podcast. Leave a 5-star review so others can find the show. But this is a show where we always continue to roll. Tomorrow, where we'll be breaking down the Rutgers team. And, a lot of folks like to call them the East Gophers or Gophers East. So we're going to break that down. A lot of changing of the guards from one program to the other, and we'll see how it all pans out this season. But I think people are giving Rutgers a lot more benefit of the doubt than has really been earned. But we're going to find out one way or another this season. But that's for tomorrow. Today's Illinois, and today we have to talk about RJ Young and his rating. So first off, let's kick it off. RJ Young, I believe he's with Fox, but he's one of the lead college football content analysts out there in any of the spaces. Now, he went to drop his rankings for all 134 teams in the FBS Football Bowl subdivision. Overall, I think it had its ups, it had its downs, and the Gophers definitely caught it on the down. Minnesota came in at 72nd in the whole country, 72nd out of 134 teams, which feels not just low, it feels way low. It feels far too low, in my opinion. And that's not just me being a homer, but you look at where Minnesota kind of fits in the Big Ten landscape and what tier I would consider them in. They got just torched further down the list in this case. Now, what do I mean when I'm saying that similar tier within the Big Ten? I think Nebraska, Maryland, Rutgers, those are the teams that the Gophers are in a similar tier with heading into the season on where they could maybe finish, maybe in that middle of the pack. And I see those squads as like bowl teams who could maybe pull an upset or two, but they are likely in the middle of the Big Ten, not at the very top with your Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Michigans, but maybe could go on to get towards the bottom back end of that with your Iowas, your Wisconsin, your USCs. I think the Gophers can get right up to that edge, up to that point this season with good production, with good QB play, with the defense bouncing back. And we've seen them there before in 2019. We've seen them on the cusp of that in 2022 and 2021. I think the Gophers have proven that they're in that kind of next man up tier. Nebraska has been growing and trying to be in that tier. Rutgers had a good year last year. Maryland's had 3 straight winning seasons. So they're all kind of right on the cusp of getting to that lower end, top competitive teams in the Big Ten. But in this ranking, he had Minnesota far beyond those teams that I would say are in a similar tier. He had Nebraska ranked at 31 of 134 teams. He had Maryland at 33, and he had Rutgers at 36. Meanwhile, Minnesota is at 72nd. And that's how big of a drop off he sees in the Big Ten, because Minnesota is the next Big Ten school beyond Rutgers. So that's how huge of a gap it is. It goes from 36th to 72nd. I think that's far too low, far too big of a discrepancy, because overall, I would say Minnesota's in the same tier of those schools. Maybe you could move them a little bit lower because they're coming off of a down year, but I would have even taken somewhere around the 40s, maybe like 48, getting toward the 50s, but damn, 72, that is a classic overlook in my opinion. Plus, you talk about they are in front of 7 other Big Ten teams, in front of your Illinois, in front of your UCLA, in front of Washington. So the Gophers got a little bit of respect on that front. They finished 11th in the Big Ten in this supposed ranking, but it just feels like far too big of a drop off. Like I said, the top end, you have Ohio State at 1, Oregon at 5, Michigan at 8, Penn State at 14, USC at 17 feels a little hot. Iowa at 24 and Wisconsin at 27. I don't hate that spread. USC is the only one that feels a little bit high in my opinion. And then you move on to Nebraska at 31, Maryland at 33, Rutgers at 36. I don't hate it. But then the Gophers, in my opinion, should come in at 45, 42. I wouldn't be mad if they came above Rutgers, but I know people are going to say, oh, that's the homer, that's the bias, whatever. We're going to find out this season. But 72 is too dang far down. That's too low. Now, there are a ton of questionable teams in front of Minnesota in this ranking as well. Obviously, I believe there are quite a few, because I think they should be at least in the 40s section. But no, 72. So who are some of the teams that are most egregious between Minnesota all the way up to that 36th in Rutgers? You've got James Madison at 39. James Madison, the team that lost their head coach, who brought them the success, because they weren't they weren't a bad team, but they weren't a team that could take on the FBS until Cignetti led them into that territory. Now, Cignetti's gone, and he moved to the Big Ten, and he moved to Indiana, and yet Indiana finds themselves below 87, somewhere in the 90s or 100s. I didn't even get through the list completely, but I didn't see Indiana up until that point. So his old program that no longer has him is at 39. Meanwhile, the Gophers 72 and Indiana, who knows where. Then you've got the Louisiana Raging Cajuns at 45. This is the area right here. This is where I said the Gophers should probably be. Louisiana Raging Cajuns. What? This is a team Minnesota absolutely beat last season, and that was in a down year, and that was with a quarterback that has been highly scrutinized and said that he wasn't ready for this level anymore. And that was all of that happened, and yet you bring in a quarterback that is higher ranked. You bring in a second year of Darius Taylor. You bring in a ton of returning O-line production. You bring in a healthy linebacker room with Cody Lindenberg leading the room. You bring in some quality transfers, and yet you're 45 or you're 72, 30 spots almost below the Louisiana Raging Cajuns that you just beat last season. Yeah, I don't know about you, but for me, the math just ain't mathing on that one. So I definitely don't know how he got there. North Carolina, the Gophers' week 1 opponent, is at 46. Now, I can respect that because they had a lot of shifts. They had a lot of changes. They lost some big pieces. But we're going to get a quick test of how bad this list could look with the Gophers at 72 in week 1, because if they come out there and they beat North Carolina, that's not to say North Carolina should be in the 70s. That's to say put some respect on the Gophers name that should be in the 40s. Like I just said, these two should be a lot closer. You've got Cincinnati at 57. Cincinnati, a team who just transitioned is the word I'm looking for there, into the Big 12 and started off 1-8 in their new conference. In their new power conference, they start out 1-8, yet somehow they get the benefit of the doubt to get to 57. Like, what are we even doing here? That part doesn't make sense to me. Stop living off of Luke Fickell's success, because he is long gone. Now, yes, I'm salty, but realistically, Minnesota should be in that 40 to 48 range to start right around UNC, above the Louisiana Raging Cajuns, who they just beat last year. And also, there was no mention of Darius Taylor whatsoever in the reasoning in the players that he likes coming back. He talked about Max Brosmer, gave him some love. I respect that. But Darius Taylor is the key and the fundamental piece of this offense, the high upside of this offense, like we saw last year, and no mention of him at all. That just goes to show me RJ Young did not look into Minnesota very much. He didn't look in too deep. He just went with the consensus of, oh, they had a down year. Oh, I can put them in the back of this area and what have you. So overall, this list is a little crazy to me. I thought it started off decent, and then I saw Minnesota all the way down at 72, and I was just like, you know what? I can't do it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, but we're going to move on to our focus of Illinois, who came in on that list at 87. So still 15 spots below the Minnesota Gophers. Hopefully the Minnesota Gophers can finally get a win over Illinois with Coach Fleck, with Coach Bret Bielema at the head of that Illinois team. We'll see. It would be the first one that Coach Fleck could get, and we absolutely need it, especially after the brutal way they dropped it last year. We're going to break down what changes have happened for the Fighting Illini coming up next. First, let's talk about the squad. Let's talk about millions of parts for your MVP, your vehicle that is with eBay Motors, because passion, drive, and patience brings the winning formula to championships and to keeping your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up. Not just keep it same old, not just keep it going, but bring it to its maximum, bring it to its best, have it being good as new. And you can level it up to peak performance with superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. It doesn't matter if you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. And with over 122 million parts, you are going to find exactly what you're looking for. And on top of that, they take care of you. They make you feel protected. They make you feel comfortable because they have the eBay guaranteed fit, which means your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP, bring home huge dubs, keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, and the eBay guaranteed fit is for U.S. customers only. All right, Gophers fans, do not forget to tap into Locked On Minnesota Sports. We have a 24/7 streaming channel over that way, so you can always get the latest content when it comes to your sports here in Minnesota. Vikings, Wild, Timberwolves, Gophers, Twins, you name it, they've got it over at Locked On Minnesota Sports with a 24/7 streaming channel. We also did live post-game reactions after the Gophers games. I believe we'll be doing that again this year, so definitely be sure to subscribe over there, and I will hopefully see you there every Saturday after the Gophers games. Now let's talk about our changes with the Illinois Fighting Illini. I didn't dive too much into the coaching staff on this one. It was a late night and we wanted to make sure to get this up, but just know Bret Bielema has Coach Fleck's number right now. Fleck has not been able to beat him. There have been some ugly losses. They have been losses that have literally been the make or break of winning the West Division, not once, but twice. You look at 2021, it was a year where Minnesota should have beat Illinois. Illinois was in a struggling year. Bret Bielema finds a way to get a dub. Minnesota ends up losing the conference by one game in 2021. You go to 2022, and that Illinois game, the Purdue game, you win either one of those games, you end up the division winner of the West. But again, it does not happen because Coach Fleck drops his coach Bret Bielema. Then you go to last season. Now, we're not playing for the West Division. I mean, we were playing for it, but we weren't anywhere in contention for it at this point in time. In Minnesota, with the game in control, with the ball in Illinois' territory, I want to say it was at like the 15-yard line on a fourth down. Their quarterback just got hurt, but they have to go for it. They have to try and get it. Minnesota's up with like 2 minutes less than 2 minutes to go. Backup quarterback comes in, throws like 3 or 4 plays, drives the entire field, scores a touchdown to Isaiah Williams, and the Gophers are gutted. You lose the game in under 2 minutes left to go, and it was heart-wrenching. It was gut punch. It was just absolutely abysmal. Bret Bielema finds a way to get it done versus PJ Fleck. And this year, I am just praying that this is the year that Coach Fleck can shake that off, break the curse, and let's move forward with getting wins. Now, overall, Illinois got some impact transfers coming. They have 13 transfers total coming into the program, but some impactful guys, I think, are Zachary Franklin. He comes from Ole Miss, but prior to that, he was at UTSA and had a lot of production. Terrence Brooks comes from Texas as a cornerback. Dennis Briggs comes as a defensive lineman from Florida State. Cole Russ comes as a tight end from Murray State. Kevin Wingington, an offensive lineman from Michigan State. And then finally, J.C. Davis from New Mexico. He is an offensive lineman as well. I think those guys are all players who could end up starting for your Illinois Fighting Illini this upcoming season. Now, the quarterback should be more of the same from last year. Luke Altmaier is back, and although they will likely want him to cut back on the turnovers, he did find some decent production here and there depending on the game. Now, he had 1,883 passing yards, 13 touchdowns, but he also had 10 interceptions and 3 fumbles lost, so he has to take better care of the football. But he also had 300 yards rushing, a couple touchdowns on the ground. Beyond Luke Altmaier, though, this room feels like a huge question mark. It feels like it could have a massive drop-off similar to the Gophers. If we lose Max Brosmer, our season could go up in flames. I think Illinois is very similar. If they lose Luke Altmaier, who knows what happens? They could be the worst team in the Big Ten. So it feels like there's a relative unknown, as opposed to last year when they lost Luke Altmaier against the Gophers, and yet John Paddock, a senior transfer, comes in, absolutely scorches the Gophers, takes over, gets a dub. I think he wins the next week after that. They have a debate on if Altmaier should come back or if Paddock should keep going. They don't have that luxury anymore. They don't. And so Illinois needs Luke Altmaier to stay healthy and successful in order to have a good season. So we'll see how that goes for them. Now, at the running back room, you've got Caden Fegan, freshman from last year, 438 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns with 116 receiving and a touchdown as well. Definitely good production for a freshman. He caught a lot of people by surprise last year. Josh McCray is back. He had 156 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Those two are going to lead this room again. Now, Fegan was relatively impressive in his freshman year last year. McCray is a solid complement, can be more of a bruising back, but long-term, I really like the freshman running back from Arizona, Khalil Valentine. He could be an upside running back for Illinois down the line. Now you go to the wide receiver room. This wide receiver room was kind of a diamond in the rough last year. Isaiah Williams was the second most productive wide receiver in the entire Big Ten Conference outside of Marvin Harrison Jr. Their second best wide receiver, Casey Washington, is also gone. So Isaiah Williams had over 1,000 yards receiving. Casey Washington had 670 yards receiving, and the two of them combined for 9 touchdowns receiving last season. That is a ton of production leaving, not to mention that Isaiah Williams was also a returning star for them too. But luckily, they have Pat Bryant coming back. He is a 560-yard receiver from last year, but he also led the teams with a total of 7 touchdowns last year, and he's back in tow, hopefully looking for a bigger role. And then they brought in a super talked about Zachary Franklin transfer. He had 2 1,000-yard receiving seasons with UTSA in 2022 and 2021. Last year, he transferred to Ole Miss, but he didn't get a lot of opportunities. I don't know if it was due to injury or he just couldn't find the field. But overall, he didn't get a lot of time with Ole Miss, so he's looking to bounce back this year. And I think he could fit that Isaiah Williams role to a T. And that's one thing you have to know with Bret Bielema is that he has certain roles, certain a system that he likes to run with. And I think he finds the right players to fit that system. Isaiah Williams was a great one. I think Zachary Franklin can fit right into that. I think that Pat Bryant can step into that Casey Washington role pretty seamlessly. And you're going to continue to see that, including when you move to the tight end room. Last year, they had Tip Ryman. He was the star of the show for the Illini, both in blocking and receiving. He's off to the NFL, but the Illini bring in a productive lower division tight end from Murray State in Cole Rusk, who had 512 yards, 6 touchdowns coming with him. I think the size and the build is similar to Ryman as well, and he could be a seamless player to transition into that role. So I think overall, Bret Bielema does a good job at filling those roles, similar to PJ Fleck. And so overall, it's going to be interesting to see how this Illinois offense shakes out. And then the offensive line. The offensive line was fairly productive, but they lost their star in Julian Pearl. He went to the NFL. But they're likely replacing that left side of the line, but they found some good additions, or at least it looks that way. Now, you've got your center back in Josh Kreutz. He graded out as an average grade on PFF. You also got Chrysler, the right guard, and Geske, the right tackle. Both of them were basically average on PFF when it came to the grading, but you hope that their chemistry and they can sync up a little bit more this upcoming season, be able to take a step further when it comes to being a better protecting unit. And then you have transfers coming in, one from Michigan State, like I said, in Wingenton, who was an above average grade on PFF. And he has experience in the conference, which you love. But his best games were against Nebraska, Ohio State, some of the best defenses in the conference last year. So he showed he can handle that type of workload. And then they brought in a stud left tackle from New Mexico, J.C. Davis. He graded out as an 84.5 grade on PFF. That's fantastic. And then on top of that, he graded out as an 82 in the pass blocking, an 84 in the run blocking. He was great across the board, high level transfer get for Illinois on the offensive line there. So I think the offense has some weapons. Once again, it looks like the offensive line can hold its own, but I'm questioning the top end. What is the ceiling of this offense? Do they have someone who can be a game changer like an Isaiah Williams? Is Zachary Franklin a guy that can fit that? Can Caden Fegan step up and be one of the best backs in the country or the conference? I just don't know if the upside is there, but it seems like they should be at least have a high floor, which should be good for them. Now you move to the defense. Last year was crazy to see how different this defense was. They were 61st in total defense, 71st in the pass defense, 63rd in rush defense, 93rd in scoring defense, and 97th in turnovers gained. Now, this is a team that was top 5 in virtually every category in defense in 2022. And then last year across the board, they averaged more into the 70 to 75th range across the categories. So it goes to show you, one, how much Ryan Walters did for that defense as the defense coordinator before he headed to Purdue. But then you look at how he finished in total defense. He was right in a similar playing field as Illinois, with a bunch of piecemealed transfers coming in, put together, and guys who he didn't handpick for his system in the recruiting game and whatnot. And yet his defense was almost as productive as this Illinois team that was returning almost their entire front 7 from a top 5 unit in the entire country. It goes to show you how critical he was as a defensive coordinator. Now, last year, the defense had 16 players that played over 300 snaps, and 8 of those 16 will be back, which should be helpful for the Illini. Their second highest graded player in Miles Scott, a safety, is back, with Xavier Scott, a cornerback, Seth Coleman, an edge, Dylan Rosiek, a linebacker, and Gabe Jacques, an edge rusher. All of those starters from last year are back again, so they have a lot of returning production that will look to hopefully get back on track and make Illinois a more respected defense. And then you go to their recruiting. They had 20 commits in the class of 2024, only one 4-star player in interior offensive lineman Andrew Dennis, so it might take a couple years before he sees the field. But like I said, I also like Khalil Valentine, a running back from Arizona, to be a long-term guy for them in the long run. Now, Illinois could be in for another up and down season, but hopefully the Gophers can get on the positive side of that roller coaster ride this time around. Now, Minnesota is looking for their first win with Fleck versus Bielema in that era. Hopefully they can get it done, but we're going to talk about potential strengths, weaknesses, and the make or break to wrap up today's show. That's coming up next. All right, Gophers fans, let's talk about FanDuel, because the Olympics are officially over, but that doesn't mean you can't get in on the action when it comes to FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Locked On. So all customers are getting hooked up with a boost or a bonus on the daily all summer long. That's right. There's something for everyone every single day, all summer long. So go on over to FanDuel.com and take advantage. Get in on the football action while you can before the season actually kicks off. I'm still taking the under on the points for the Gophers versus North Carolina in week 1, but you could go and bet on total number of wins for each Big Ten team. You could go take a shot on who will be the conference winner, or so much more. There's so many options to choose from. You could probably even bet on who will be fired first in the college football season, all that and more over at FanDuel.com. So take your turn, take your time, take the fun back into sports and take that back in your grasp and go to FanDuel.com. Visit FanDuel.com today, a FanDuel official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and of Locked On. All right, Gophers fans, we are wrapping it up with strengths, weaknesses, and the make or break for the Week 10 matchup versus the Fighting Illini. Now, when you're talking about strengths for this Illinois team, you have an extremely experienced head coach who dominated with Wisconsin. He goes to Illinois, gets them back on track. He gets them to bounce back, has a couple of up years, has a couple down years, but it seems like the program is growing overall. And I think he seemed to have PJ's number, plain and simple. We have not beaten him since he's come to Illinois. Now, that being said, you also have a returning quarterback with experience, and he can be a threat through the air or on the ground, which is definitely helpful for Illinois. And you've got a similar play style, similar makeup as the Gophers when it comes to priding yourself on defense, priding yourself on time of possession. So overall, Illinois can play a style of football that really takes what the Gophers want to do, and whoever ends up winning that battle ends up winning the game. Finally, you have a lot of returning talent on the defense, so that should be a strength. You look at the weaknesses, you've got a defense that did not play to their upside. So is that their true colors? Are they really not as good of a defense? Was Ryan Walters really the magic of that system? Or will they bounce back towards a more top 30 type defense this upcoming season? On top of that, will the key transfers carry over seamlessly, or will they end up being not a fit? That's a big question. It could be a weakness for this team if it doesn't pan out right. Then you've got the passing game. Did it take too much of a hit in the production? Like I said, Isaiah Williams, that's 1,000 yards receiving gone out the window. Casey Washington, another 670 yards receiving out the window. That's 9 total touchdowns out the window. Can you replace it with a guy like Zachary Franklin? Can Pat Bryant step up and take on more of a role, even though he took on a healthy role last year? Or will they fall apart in the passing game? And then finally, are there game breakers on offense and defense? I don't know. I don't know if it's more of a high floor, low ceiling type team, or if they have guys that can be difference makers. So overall, that's the potential weaknesses there. But I think when it comes to the make or break for this Week 10 matchup, it's fundamental football. That's what's needed to beat Bret Bielema and the Fighting Illini. Similar to Kirk Ferentz in Iowa, you have to take care of the ball and be consistent. You do that and you can win this game. But the second that you make an error, they capitalize and you find yourself on the wrong side of the scoreboard. So this is another game where Minnesota will likely need a win in order to make a bowl game. And it also could be a momentum builder for the Gophers in this late part of the season. Because if you can stack wins with UCLA, Maryland, and then Illinois, that could build some momentum and go and try and take a road game at Rutgers. And then you head to home versus Penn State and away versus Wisconsin, which are going to be massive games to close out the season. Hopefully you've already secured bowl eligibility at this point, but this will hopefully help you get the momentum and the trajectory to keep the wins rolling in. So the top 3 make or breaks for me in this game. First of all, take care of the football. Plain and simple. If you can't do that, you are not going to win this game. Secondly, let Darius Taylor in the run game control the momentum of the game, but let Max Brosmer close it out. We saw this last year, except we didn't. No Darius Taylor in the game. And then when you needed the pass game to cook, you needed it to light it up, especially in the late parts of the game when you fell behind in the last 2 minutes, the passing game could not get going. So overall, hopefully Minnesota can shake off that abysmal game from last season where they blew a late lead. But then the final thing is getting off the field on 3rd and 4th down. No extra opportunities, no letting them drive the whole field on a 4th and 10 from the 15-yard line of their own side of the field. I am getting just flashbacks from that game as I talk about it. So those are the 3 keys. Take care of the football, let Darius Taylor in the run game build the momentum, and let Max Brosmer close it out. And then finally get off the field on 3rd and 4th downs on defense. That's going to do it for us. Tomorrow we're breaking down the Rutgers, the Gophers of the East. It's going to be a fun one. I will see you then. Row the boat, Sky Umago Gophers as always. And please don't forget to hit subscribe.